We back. Welcome back to the Prime Hoop Show. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the Warriors. We're going to talk about what's going on in Philadelphia and Christian Wood and the Dallas Mavs. That's SC where we're going to start off with. So, I was watching the Mavs game and I saw this. And then I saw this. And that's when it hit me. After all those seasons with the whole Luka-Porzingis duo, then Jalen Brunson and Luka, sometimes you got the Luka, the one-man show, the destruction crew. That got me thinking, is this the best the Mavs have looked so far? Well, first, let's look at Christian Wood, what he brings to this team. Over his career, Christian Wood, he averages 14 points per game, 7 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 block. Over his career, he also shoots 38% from 3. By the way, he is 6'10", so he's kind of like the perfect stretch big man that fits with Luka, that spaces the floor, that does a little bit of everything as well. He can shoot the 3. Last season, he shot 39% from 3. Last season, he also shot 40% on catch and shoot 3s, which is pretty much perfect in this Luka-centric offense. Last season, Wood, he also averaged 17.9, almost 18 points per game, 10 rebounds, 2.3 assists, 1 block. So he can really thrive at different parts of the game. Rebounding is going to be super impactful to close out defensive possessions for the Mavs. The Mavs are going to need that if they want to be able to get stops in the playoffs. He can protect the rim as well, a little bit, but definitely he averages 1 block, so he's definitely proficient in that. But the fact that he can also switch out onto the perimeter, guard the pick and roll, that's something that Porzingis never even figured out well enough. So he can stretch the floor. Last season, he shot 73% at the rim. So he provides that shooting presence outside. He provides that interior pressure, that interior scoring as well. So far with the Mavs, he's coming off the bench, sure, but he's been producing like crazy. Over the first 3 games, he's averaging 25 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 block. If you want some context to how his first couple games with the Mavs went, check out this tweet from Kevin O'Connor. So Christian Wood, over 49 minutes, he scored 50 points. The Mavs have an offensive rating of 147 in just 31 minutes that he shared the floor with Luka. How about this? Wood, he's averaging 5 more points per game than any teammate Luka has had in his career. So Christian Wood is technically the best teammate Luka's ever had. So he's fitting right in, but the fact that he's coming off the bench, this could be like a early narrative for the 6th Man of the Year award. I think he probably should be the favorite depending on how this continues. Well, if we're talking about the 6th Man of the Year award, one thing that's definitely going to come into play is whether the Mavs have to be winning games for that. So what Christian Wood bring to the Mavs so that they can actually win more games? 3-point shooting first, like this.
Phoenix down by 1, Wood. That's what he does.
Like this.
Wood, little step back, high arcing 3.
Like this.
You're right. That sounded like
He brings interior scoring, like this.
Wood isolated against Gray. Good help, but it didn't matter. Chris
Like this.
Dinwiddie on the baseline drive. Great cut and flush by Wood.
Self-creation, like this.
Close to 40 in the doggone close court.
Like this.
He's not going to do anything. I mean,
nice screen.
he's doing stuff like that.
Don't ho-hum about
Rebounding, like this.
There's Doncic around the dribble handoff. Misses the shot. Wood inside, battling. Oh!
Defense, like this.
Is making him work super duper hard on this possession. Here's Kane fighting, swatted by Wood. Shot clock, Santi Aldama. Oh, he looks up and sees it in time. He did get it on.
Pick and roll, like this.
I would just go in there and I would put on old clips of Beverly Hills Cop, try to get their mind off of it. Here's Wood finishing.
Playing with Luka, he thrives too, like
What it
this.
looks like. That's the approach that they took. Good pass.
He can even play without Luka, like
It's
this.
going to be important, and they've got to take a jump and continue to improve handling the basketball and being playmakers.
And he's got a touch of playmaking as well, which I didn't really see before in the past. So you never know. This might actually be getting unlocked now that he's on the Mavs. So now that we know what Christian Wood brings to the team, how do the Mavs actually now compare to the rest of the West? The Mavs, they look like they've improved in all the key areas that championship caliber teams have. They have a top 10 defense, a top 10 offense through the first 10 days of the season. Last season, they had the 7th ranked defense. So I think a lot of this credit should be given to Jason Kidd, and he has not been given that credit yet. He's done a great job especially with the Mavs defense. He was smart enough to let just Luka just run the offense, but the consistent improvement on defense, that's what he should be getting credited for. That is what took the Mavs to the conference finals last season. There's a reason why they were stuck in the first round over and over. Of course, they were playing Kawhi and Paul George, sure. But more importantly, it's the defense. That improvement is what got them all the way to the conference finals. And if the Mavs have a great season, Jason Kidd should, in my opinion, be considered in the Coach of the Year conversation. Alright, so if we're comparing the Mavs to the rest of the Western Conference, the top teams they will be competing with, obviously number one is going to be the Warriors. The Warriors, they have a more proven core. They got decent depth. It's tough to see the Mavs beating the Warriors in a 7-game series. It's kind of tough, but of course, I'll actually watch more Mavs games, let the season play on and see just how good this team can be. But it's tough right at the moment to say that they will beat the Warriors. How about the comparing them to the Clippers? When it comes to the Clippers, I just think the Clippers have too much defensive versatility. So much so that they can stop the rest of the role players on the Mavs. I think that they would be able to stop the Mavs in terms of their role players like Dorian Finney-Smith, Kleba, Christian Wood. I definitely do not think they have a answer for Luka, but they can just let Luka score 50 and shut down the rest of the role players. That is so much more doable. I do not think that the Mavs defense, on the other hand, can do the same thing. I do not think that they can actually stop the Clippers offense. The Clippers role players are much higher caliber, much more veteran, much more experienced. So I do think that the Clippers defense is going to be able to stop the Mavs as a whole, not Luka, but as a whole, whereas the Mavs defense probably will not be able to stop the Clippers. But we'll have to see. You know, the Mavs have never really had a defensive player like Christian Wood that they can kind of stick on Kawhi Leonard or on a Paul George. And, you know, Luka does kind of look like a freaking god against the Clippers. So that's going to be interesting. I want to see. We'll see. How about any other teams in the West? The Grizzlies, please. Luka owned them by 20 the other night. The Suns, Luka is their daddy. Oh my god, that is real life bullying, and we're all accomplices. We're just watching this man bully an entire franchise. Who else? The Timberwolves? Please, don't make me laugh. So the Mavs aren't exactly far off. Things could kind of go their way by luck. You know, injuries could be going on for other teams. Injuries are also, of course, kind of going up more and more frequently each season, especially to more key, more star players. But on the other hand, yeah, man, Luka's the damn truth. Literally, he's the best offensive player I have probably ever seen. And I grew up watching LeBron. I grew up watching Kevin Durant. The Mavs got to the Western Conference Finals with Luka and Jalen Brunson as their second best player. So the fact that Christian Wood can also do so much more things that the Mavs actually needed last season, their ceiling this season is so much higher than what it was last season. And one thing that's kind of in my mind, we'll see how this goes. We might be looking at like a similar season to 2007 LeBron, who was pretty much so unstoppable that he scored 25 straight points in the Eastern Conference Finals. He also dragged those Cavs, those nasty doo-doo Cavs, all the way to the finals. And let's be honest, Luka does look that freaking dominant. Let me know what you think. Alright, so let's move on to our next topic, which is, of course, the Sixers. Sound the fraud alarm. There is definitely something going on with the Sixers. So the Sixers, they started the season 0-3. They got embarrassed by the Spurs, a team literally trying to lose every game this season, literally ran the Sixers off the court. This is not what a team that said their goal this season was to win a championship. This is not what a team looks like. They also said they wanted to be the best defensive team in the league this season. To not care about individual awards like MVPs now. This is not what they should be looking like if after all that talking during the summer and during media day. So I had to go and check, where is the real problem in Philadelphia? Well, first let's talk about the history of the Sixers, what their front office has been doing. Elton Brand, Brian Colangelo before him the originator of the tanking process, of the process itself, Sam Hinkie. Let me give you a rundown of what the Sixers GMs have done during this whole The Process run. In 2013, at that time, then GM Sam Hinkie, he started the process, losing games on purpose to get a top draft pick and to draft a generational talent. In 2014, the very first season of the process, they drafted Joel Embiid with the 3rd pick and Jeremy Grant with the 39th pick. Jeremy Grant was later traded to OKC for Ersan Ilyasova. Terrible move. In 2015, they drafted Jahlil Okafor with the 3rd pick. He became injury prone, never became a starting caliber player. Today, he now plays in China. Great move. In 2016, they drafted Ben Simmons with the 1st overall pick. He never developed beyond his rookie skill set. He never fit with Embiid. Today, he's in Brooklyn. Terrible move. In 2017, they drafted Markelle Fultz with the 1st overall pick once again. That was a hot mess. Terrible. He barely played, and he later got traded to the Magic. In 2018, they drafted Landry Shamet with the 26th pick in the 1st round. He was traded within 1 year to the Clippers. Wonderful job. In 2019, they traded for Matisse Thybulle in the 1st round. Today, he's literally unplayable because he also can't shoot. In 2020, they drafted Tyrese Maxey in the 1st round. Finally, they got a player that actually fits with Embiid. It literally took them 6 years to finally get a 2nd player that fits with Joel Embiid. Wow. Anyways, they traded for Jimmy Butler. They traded for JJ Redick. They traded for Tobias Harris. Despite looking like a championship squad finally in that 2018-2019 season, the front office decided, let's pay Tobias Harris a huge, massive contract. Today, I think we can all agree that looks like a massive overpay. They did not re-sign Jimmy Butler. They did not re-sign JJ Redick. Another classic Sixers front office move. The Sixers, they tried to isolate the issue. They tried to blame the head coach and fire Brett Brown. They hired Doc Rivers. Still, 0 Eastern Conference Finals appearances. The team, they decided that a big 3 of Embiid, Ben Simmons, and Tobias Harris was the future, but they ended up blaming Ben Simmons and shipped him out for James Harden. Again, with James Harden, still not exactly competitive. They tried to even poach veterans off of their rival teams, like say Al Horford, who was technically a staple, and even today, he's still a staple of the Boston Celtics. In between, the Sixers tried to poach him, and they ended up having a terrible season. Yet again, another terrible move. They poached Dwight Howard from the championship roster of the Lakers. That also did not work out. Another terrible move. This season, they poached PJ Tucker, who was on the championship Milwaukee Bucks. So far, they started the season 0 for 3. They were 1 for 3 at the time of this recording. Great move. This front office, Elton Brand especially, has never, over the entire course of the entire time, they never actually built an identity for this team. They tried to steal pieces of other competitive teams, hoping the same thing would just work for them. They never built their own identity. Moving on from the front office, where else could the problem be in Philadelphia? Well, for sure, I think a lot of Sixers fans would agree with me here. Doc Rivers. From the day that the Sixers signed Doc Rivers, I personally knew this was a horrible decision. He was literally coming off the most embarrassing collapse in playoffs history with the Clippers, losing a 3-1 lead to the Nuggets. How does that qualify him to immediately get another head coaching position? I'll never understand. Doc Rivers, since 2012, he's coached Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and James Harden. he has literally never gotten past the second round of the playoffs. The Clippers literally went to the Western Conference Finals. They actually got past the second round the same exact year after firing Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers was again in the hot seat when the Sixers almost gave up a 3-0 series lead to the Raptors last playoffs. This guy is straight up trash. One of my main criticisms of Doc Rivers was that he's just not creative in his schemes in this era of the NBA. He's got very little to show in terms of in-series adjustments and counters to the chess match that is playoff basketball. Even watching the Sixers this season so far, after all this talk in the summer about having a full training camp with James Harden and Joel Embiid and the new depth the team has this season, the offense just looks terrible. There's a ton of dependence on iso ball, just hoping and praying that James Harden and Joel Embiid can both score 35-40 a game and save them that night. The rest of the team just stands around. There's very little off-ball action. Tyrese Maxey doesn't even look like he knows where he fits in when both Embiid and Harden are on the floor. The offense does kind of suspiciously look very similar to the James Harden on the Houston Rockets offense that just had everyone just stand around around the three-point line. James Harden just dribbles 18 different times, runs the clock out, and everyone just stands there and watches it. So I'm questioning what the identity of this team is in a championship season when the identity is pretty much the same as last season. I'm questioning the effort and the buy-in this team has, especially on defense. And I'm definitely questioning what Doc Rivers even accomplished. What did he even do during training camp? So far, the Sixers have been kind of changing up the front office. They've been changing up their head coaches, changing up the roster multiple times. So, I think it's time for us to ask the most important question. Is the problem James Harden and Joel Embiid? Now, I want to make this clear. I'm not saying that Harden or Embiid are anything but all-star, all-NBA, MVP caliber players. James Harden literally won an MVP. What I'm saying is that it's their style of play that's the problem. Say, for example, on offense, Embiid and Harden, they surprisingly have a similar style of play. They both thrive in ISO. They don't take advantage of their skill set off ball, at least as much as they should be. They play a very slow-paced, half-court base style against set defenses that can focus in and hone their efforts against a specifically Embiid and Harden. And the worst part of this offense, they're both foul baiters that live at the free throw line. Last season, Embiid was number 1 in free throws, Harden was number 3. The year before that, Embiid was number 1 in free throws, Harden was number 7. The year before that, Harden was number 1, Embiid was number 6. Before that, again, Harden was number 1, Embiid was number 2. Before that, Harden was number 1, Embiid was number 5. Before that, Harden was number 1, Embiid was number 8. So both players rely heavily on the refs to get them to the line, boost their scoring numbers, and slow down the game so that they can actually get rest in game. This has not and will not work in the playoffs. James Harden is literally living proof that you do not get the same whistle and foul calls in the playoffs and at the end of games. And when they do not get those free throws, or the other team is also able to maybe keep it close in terms of free throw attempts, those are the games where Embiid and Harden, they have just looked terrible because they don't know how else to play. This duo of two ISO-heavy players that foul bait is not a winning strategy to build around. Kobe, the Mamba, he told us about Harden's style of play.
I think I'm not a fan of in terms of winning championships. I don't think that style is ever going to win championships. Not with this style of play, it won't win, right? With one player dominating the ball.
And till today, Kobe was right. The problem with the Harden-Embiid duo is not just on offense, folks. They have issues on defense as well. Let me show you a couple plays. Check this one out. This is from the Heat versus the Sixers last season in the second round. Check out this one. This is the Hawks versus the Sixers in the second round of the year before. Check this one out. This is from the Celtics versus the Sixers in the first round the year before. What's the key takeaway from these three clips that I just showed? Well, it's not the fact that all three clips are from the last 3 elimination games for the Sixers. It's also not the fact that they're all from the fourth quarter. The key takeaway is that the defender in all 3 clips, Joel Embiid, on defense. There's a lot of fraudulence in terms of Joel Embiid's reputation as a defender. He has a history of getting fatigued late in games, late in series, especially these long 7-game playoff series. There's plenty of evidence of this too. He's had many stinkers, terrible performances in key games in the playoffs. He's thrown teammates under the bus when he himself has stunk it up. There's plenty of evidence, video evidence of this. He's been straight up clamped also by other big men. Marc Gasol is literally his daddy. He owned the Sixers and dipped. The other night against the Bucks, Brook Lopez owned Joel Embiid. How do you expect me to respect this man as the so-called best big man in the league when there are other similar big men that can guard you? James Harden, at best, is a average defender. Let's be honest, I'm not expecting him to suddenly become an active off-ball help defender just because he can show flashes. He did show flashes in that fourth quarter of the game versus the Bucks. Is that reliable? Probably not. And Embiid and Harden's conditioning is only going to decline as they get older. Harden already has a history of hamstring issues that can slow him down. They have a clear weakness against teams that can play fast, run them up and down the court. So to me, it's tough to isolate the problem. It literally could be the front office, it could be the head coach, or even the star players. But over the years, they have changed the front office. They have changed the head coach. They have changed the second star. There's really only one thing that can be left to be changed now. And that's where the Sixers have to probably make the toughest decision in franchise history. So, I could be wrong, but how long are they going to keep tweaking things while the rest of their competition is just improving around them in the Eastern Conference? Hard to say. So I was watching opening night, Warriors versus Lakers in the second quarter. So the Warriors actually kind of play this lineup of Jordan Poole, James Wiseman, Dante DiVincenzo, Jonathan Kuminga, and Moses Moody. That lineup was +4 in the minutes that they played. It was small sample sizes, sure. But those minutes, that could be just like a little hint into the bigger picture for the Warriors, what their plans are. So what are the Warriors actually trying to do? Well, let's actually talk first about this little lineup. Wiseman, Poole, Kuminga, Moody. That lineup was +4 against the Lakers. James Wiseman, he has not played much due to injuries. He's shown that he can be a serviceable big man for Kevon Looney so far. He's got a ton of length, can cover space fast, super athletic. He's also got decent, pretty good, above average defensive instincts too. One of the underrated things that he brings to the Warriors is basically a consistent rebounding presence for all 48 minutes. When you have Looney and you replace him with James Wiseman, that's a pretty good big man rotation. They're also not exactly asking him to do much on offense. Just play the pick and roll hard to the rim, finish plays, grab offensive rebounds. Just a lot of the small things. Jonathan Kuminga, he was the prospect that was said to be the next Paul George. He's still pretty raw, but you can see the flashes, the fluidity in his game, the wingspan, the length. He can block shots for his position. He can get into passing lanes. He can actually become, if developed correctly, into a great two-way perimeter player in the future. Moses Moody, on the other hand, he brings even more shooting to the Warriors than they already even have. If the Warriors can kind of convince him to play a 3-and-D role, he would fit perfectly next to Kuminga on the perimeter and Wiseman in the interior, spacing the floor. He's got much more to his game, of course. He is a pretty talented player. But the team may actually just want him just to not do too much, play his role. Moving on to Jordan Poole. Jordan Poole is Jordan Poole. He's actually NBA champion Jordan Poole, and he just got his contract extension, so I'm not going to talk too much about him. We already know what he brings to this team. He already fits in with the veteran core alongside Curry and Clay and Draymond. But he can also come off the bench. He can also come off the starting lineup, and he also fits into the timeline with Wiseman, Kuminga, Moody. They can actually use Jordan Poole's example of fitting into the system to also buy in. They can all kind of develop together in the system, the Warrior system, in the Warriors winning culture, in a world-class organization and develop all in-house. There's always a world, sure, in which James Wiseman gets injured again, becomes injury-prone. Kuminga never reaches his ceiling with a reduced role, but I trust in the Warriors. They now also have promoted Jama to assistant coach. I'm not going to pronounce his last name. On the other hand, he was the mastermind behind the developmental machine for the Toronto Raptors. We already know the all-star level players that he helped develop there, Siakam, Fred VanVleet. So if I'm betting my money, chances of their development being a success, chances are pretty high. I would bet on most of these players developing into impactful players. So if we're talking big picture, there is an immediate effect and a long-term plan. The immediate effect, if these young players can step up the season, is just that the Warriors can be competitive this season. The Warriors, they lost a few, rotational players from their championship roster. Otto Porter Jr., Gary Payton II. They didn't specifically have to go and replace them because they already had Kuminga and Moody playing minimal minutes, but meaningful minutes last season as rookies. Wiseman didn't play at all really, and Jordan Poole, now he can actually go take a bigger role as he's already proven to have success with the vets, and he also fits into the timeline of the younger players. So this is going to show up, strengthening the depth the Warriors had last season, the same depth that made a huge difference in the finals when the Warriors kept bringing player after player after player off the bench that were actually contributing in some way to the game, and the Celtics just could not actually keep up with that. Wiseman and Kuminga have great two-way potential. Their ceiling on that side is pretty high, and they're also pretty versatile on defense, which is super useful with bench players. And the Warriors starters, they can still run the starters, run their core. They're still pretty dominant. This is going to be especially helpful. This depth from the young players is going to be especially helpful this season because the Western Conference has got a whole bunch of tough opponents now. Luka and the Mavs look much more deadly now with Christian Wood. Ja Morant seems to have taken another leap. He might actually be in the MVP race early days, but keep that in mind. Their biggest competition though to the Warriors is probably the Clippers. The Clippers have two superstars, great coaching with Ty Lue, and a ton of reliable veteran players coming off the bench. That's kind of the difference between the Warriors bench. The Warriors bench is filled with young, inexperienced players. It's entirely possible, it's entirely possible that the Warriors, their young players, end up showing their age under the bright lights. That's actually a big reason why championship teams, they do kind of prefer veteran players over younger, more sophomore type of players like these guys. But these players, they have been with the Warriors organization their entire career so far. They've been in this culture. They know to follow the game plan because none of them really, I'm pretty sure everyone in the city of San Francisco knows none of these players will ever be as great as Steph Curry is. So they need to fall in line. And that gets me to my third point. Steph Curry and the GOAT conversation. This era of the Warriors was the version where the team was heavily dependent on Curry. In the future, he can actually let the reins of the offense go more and more as he ages. They can let Kuminga, Poole, Andrew Wiggins, of course, run the offense as they grow into their roles over time. Curry can still be impactful because his shooting is not going to just go away as he ages. That's actually one great thing about his style of play. It's not dependent on a whole bunch of athleticism. But the bigger offensive roles, the load, can be taken on by the younger players and relieve that pressure and the physical toll it will take on Curry's body. And thus, reducing that load on his body is going to elongate his playing career, his run, and his resume. Curry already has 4 titles, 1 Finals MVP, 2 MVPs itself, and the title as the greatest shooter of all time. But this is what's going to actually help Steph Curry get that deserved respect in the GOAT conversation. A lot of people do not include Steph Curry in the GOAT conversation, but it's entirely possible that Steph Curry, Klay, Draymond, they're all over 32 years of age. Sure, they're old, so they could end up getting injured as they age, and they're the main engine for the championships in the Bay. But Steph Curry already has 4 rings, 2 regular season MVPs. The Warriors are favored to go back to the finals in the West, at least. Imagine the Warriors win again because their young players provide this incredible depth. That's 5 rings for Steph Curry. He also looks like he's very much in his prime. I would probably say he can play at this level for maybe at least another 3 seasons. His game's gonna kind of age like wine. Even at a reduced level, he can still play for another 3 seasons. So at the minimum, I can probably see him play, say, another minimum 6 more seasons. I don't think it's so much of a hot take if I say in those 6 seasons, the Warriors can win another 2 rings. They could easily, at that point, be considered the greatest dynasty in NBA history. Imagine Steph, he retires with a resume of 5 or 6 rings, 2 regular season MVPs, one of them being the first ever unanimous MVP, 1 or 2 finals MVPs in the future. He might win another finals MVP, the title of the greatest shooter of all time. He was part of the greatest dynasty of all time. He was part of the 73-9 team. He dominated his era as well, consistently beating Kevin Durant, consistently beating LeBron. And I think that is the bigger story that's going on in Golden State. If the younger players develop and help extend this Warriors dynasty run, for myself and a lot of people that didn't necessarily watch Michael Jordan and the Bulls win 6 rings, we did get to live through the Warriors dynasty. For us, it would be very easy for us to make that argument that Steph Curry is the greatest player of all time. That's all I got for you so far. I'm going to be dropping another episode every Tuesday, so keep an eye out for that. Like, subscribe, I'm out.